Welcome to the Piscean Ponderings, episode 4. So I want to talk about getting rich, getting wealthy through astrology. And I'm going to be just pointing out my own chart to help you understand how we see wealth signatures in the natal chart. So, for example, my natal chart contains, specific indicators of wealth potential just like yours. And these aren't just passive promises. These are actually energetic blueprints that require conscious activation. And we're going to analyze both the Western and Vedic techniques to unlock financial abundance with timing strategies to achieve wealth by the age of 25 years old, for example. And I'll be reading right off my tablet here, as you can see. Just my notes I keep with me. Mercury in Pisces. It's in its shadow, February 16, 2026. In fact, before we even get into this, I think we should start doing this in every episode, is just going over what is even going on today on a planetary view. So let's go to AstroSeek. I love using AstroSeek. It gets shat on a lot, but some people understand it's actually pretty good. So today, Sun is in Aquarius. Later stages, almost at the 29th degree, but it's at 2801 degrees Aquarius today. Moon is in Aquarius at 1820 degrees. It's a balsamic moon. Mercury's in Pisces. Venus is in Pisces. Mars is in Aquarius. Jupiter's in Cancer and it's retrograde. Saturn's in Aries. Uranus is in Taurus. Neptune is in Aries. Pluto's in Aquarius. Of course, Rahu is in Pisces and it's retrograde. Meaning Ketu's in Virgo. Black Moon Lilith is in Sagittarius. And Chiron is in Aries. So, great day to be productive. So let's talk about my own primary wealth indicators in my Western chart. So I'll just give you an example of the fact that I have an 11th house stellium. So Sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, and Uranus in Pisces in my 11th house. And the 11th house is the natural house of gains, your hopes, your wishes, and networks. So with 4 planets in the 11th house, I have extraordinary potential to manifest wealth through collective consciousness. I tap into what masses need before they even know they need it. Technological innovation, Uranus makes me naturally gifted with disruptive technology. Artistic monetization, Venus means I can make money through beauty, design, or sensory arts. And communication mastery, Mercury in Pisces means my words, writing, and teaching can generate income. Let's talk about my wealth activation technique. So I am to create a daily practice of visualizing my desires while holding a sapphire or amethyst, it's Pisces stones. And I write down my income goals and I place them in the east corner of my home, the 11th house direction, each Thursday, which is Jupiter's day. So this is what I would help you with as a client, going over Pluto. Pluto's in Sagittarius for me in the 8th house. It brings transformative wealth. Other people's resources, investments, inheritance, grants, partnerships, research and deep investigation, data analysis, forensic work, psychology, sexuality, and taboo subjects, if channeled into healing or education, and death and rebirth cycles. My wealth comes through phoenix-like transformations. So I study the stock market, study cryptocurrency, and investment strategies, because my 8th house Pluto gives me an almost psychic ability to sense value where others see risk. And I start with paper trading to build confidence. Let's talk about the part of fortune. My part of fortune aligns with Pluto, amplifying wealth through transformation. So this is simply a karmic wealth signature. I am meant to transmute pain into prosperity. So every time I experience a setback or trauma, I immediately ask, how can this become my next income stream? And journal these insights. My fortune lies in alchemizing suffering into service. So the midheaven is your career. also known as the MC. And my midheaven is conjunct my Chiron and Aquarius in the 10th house. So my career is directly tied to my wounds, Chiron. I will become wealthy by healing others through my own wounds, essentially. Specifically, Aquarius rules technology, innovation, and communities. My career success comes from creating systems that heal collective trauma, using technology to serve marginalized groups, and being a public figure who normalizes neurodivergence and mental health struggles. Of course, I'm documenting my journey publicly via YouTube under a pseudonym. My vulnerability becomes my currency. By age 25, the platform can generate substantial income through sponsorships, courses, and speaking engagements. Possibly even before then, because I already have opportunities. Saturn in Cancer in the 3rd house, building through discipline. So Saturn retrograde in the 3rd house in Cancer, debilitated. It means my wealth requires mastering communication and local networks. I may feel insecure about my voice because, I'm a fucking detransitioner, or ideas. I have strong opinions. But this placement actually promises long-term wealth if I persist and I don't off myself. Let's say I create a daily writing practice, so even 15 minutes, these writings will eventually become books, courses, or content that generates passive income, and I've been writing since the age of 12 years old. Saturn rewards consistency over brilliance. So let's talk about the Western transit timing when wealth actually manifests in our natal lives, our mortal lives. Age transit wealth opportunities. So for me, from the ages of 20 through 21, Jupiter is going through Aries in the 12th house, behind the scenes work, spiritual foundations for wealth. When I'm 21 through 22, Jupiter's through Taurus, 1st house, personal branding, physical products, self-investment. And it's just making the transits in my natal chart through these houses and these signs for me natally. But if you don't know what your birth chart looks like, I suggest that you comment down below and I get to you as soon as possible. And we figure out what's going on one-on-one, of course, whether it's via a Google Meet, a Zoom call, whatever it is, and we can figure something out. But from the ages of 22 through 23, Jupiter is transiting through Gemini in my 2nd house, multiple income streams, writing, teaching, sales. From the ages of 23 through 24, I'm going to have to plug in my laptop really quick. Right. From the ages of 23 through 24, Jupiter is transiting through Cancer in my 3rd house, local networks, siblings, community-based income, and then from the ages of 24 through 25, Jupiter is transiting through Leo in my 4th house, home-based business, real estate, family wealth. So the critical wealth window, it was April 2024 through May 2025, and I was working a lot. Jupiter in Taurus was in my 1st house, or transiting my 1st house. So this is when I must have launched something. My physical presence, personal brand, and tangible products would have succeeded. So let's talk about the Saturn return preparation, which I obviously haven't experienced. It begins around the ages of 28, 29. You're going to start to feel it, but its seeds are planted right now because Saturn's in my 3rd house, and it means wealth foundation is built through consistent communication. So by age 25, I'll have published a book, maybe multiple published books, a substantial blog archive, and a YouTube channel with over 100 or more videos. Of course, the goal is 1,000 or more videos, and then 1,000 subscribers and people that are learning astrology and teaching it. So let's talk about my Vedic astrological wealth strategies. So my primary wealth indicators in my Vedic chart, I have Jupiter in Virgo retrograde in the 5th house. Notice how that changed. And I didn't even say what my Jupiter was in my Western chart. Jupiter's in Libra, and it's in my 6th house. But now Jupiter is in Virgo, and it's in the 5th house. So in Vedic astrology, the 5th house rules Purva Punya, merit from past lives, intelligence, and speculation. Jupiter retrograde here indicates I've brought spiritual wealth from past lives that must now be converted to material wealth. My intelligence is my greatest asset. I can outthink competitors. Retrograde means my wealth comes through introspection and internal development, not external validation. So I am to study Vedic mathematics, astrology, or any system that combines logic with spirituality. I teach these systems, and my Jupiter retrograde in Virgo in the 5th house makes me a naturally gifted teacher when I teach from my own internal discoveries. 10th Lord Saturn in the 3rd house in Gemini. Saturn rules your career. It's the 10th house, and it sits in my 3rd house of communication, effort, and siblings. So wealth for me comes through writing, speaking, or any form of communication, books, blogs, scripts, Instagram reels, short travels and local business, collaboration with siblings or sibling-like partners, consistent, disciplined effort over many years. That's Saturn, working for many years before it's discovered. Talking to, only so many people right now. The goal is to create a content schedule and never break it, which I'm already doing. Not breaking it, I already created a schedule for myself every day. So even when I'm depressed, even when I doubt myself, Saturn returns to reward those who show up. So wealth compounds through consistency for anybody. We all have Saturn in our chart, whether Saturn's in Pisces or Saturn's in Aries. Let's talk about the 11th Lord Venus in the 10th house of Aquarius. So for me, in my Vedic chart, Venus rules the 11th house of gains, and it sits in the 10th house of career. This is a direct wealth through career signature. Specifically, my career must involve beauty, art, luxury, or relationships, collaborations, and I'll earn through technology, Aquarius, and innovation. Women, females, will be the key to my wealth, whether it's clients, partners, or mentors. I network with women in tech, I join female founder communities, and my wealth flows through feminine connections. Not saying I'm never going to help a man, or men, don't tell me that you want your birth chart read. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying because of that placement specifically that I have in my birth chart, as a female, I should be collaborating with people of my own sex as well, more than men, which I've collaborated with a lot of men to do some things that I really regret. So let's talk about the Aruda Lagna analysis. So my Aruda Lagna, which is the AL, it's in my 4th house in Leo with the 7th and 9th house overlays. This means my public image and wealth are tied to my home, mother, and emotional foundations. Partnerships, which is the 7th house, and higher knowledge, which is the 9th house, brings me into the public eye. I will be known for my emotional depth and healing abilities. I work from home. I make my home a sanctuary that also generates income, home studio, online business, etc. My wealth is literally homegrown. My yogi point in Libra at 2952 degrees. Of course, it's the anaretic. My yogi point, which is spiritual wealth indicator, it's in Libra, which is a sign of balance and partnerships. The final degree indicates culmination and mastery, and this means my spiritual wealth manifests through partnerships and relationships. I am here to master balance between giving and receiving, solitude and connection. So by age 29, which is my Saturn return, I will have achieved mastery in partnership dynamics. I never work alone by the age of 29. Even if I'm introverted, I find one business partner or mentor, guru, and my wealth multiplies through collaboration. All right, let's talk about the Vedic Dasha system, which is essentially your Vedic wealth timeline. So I'm currently experiencing my Jupiter Mahadasha until 2027. So Jupiter is in my 5th house, and this is my wealth building decade. Within this, specific periods are critical. So we have the age Antardasha wealth focus. So from the ages of 20 through 21, I'm experiencing Jupiter, which is foundations, learning, and spiritual wealth. From 21 through 22, Jupiter, Saturn, discipline, structure, building systems. 22 through 23, Jupiter, Mercury, communication, writing, teaching, income. 23 through 24, Jupiter, Ketu, south node of the moon, unexpected windfalls, spiritual breakthroughs. And 24 through 25, Jupiter, Venus, career gains, luxury income, partnerships. So the critical wealth window, it started November 2025 through November 2026. I'm experiencing my Jupiter-Venus period. This is when career and wealth align perfectly. I launch my business, I seek investors, and release my major product during this window. Let's talk about the integrated wealth strategies. I'll just give you an example. Like daily wealth rituals. It's mainly just writing down intentions like, I am earning $10,000 monthly through my healing technology. Alright. Now I want to say, essentially for me, wealth comes through wounds. Wealth comes through technology. Wealth comes through isolation. And wealth comes through service. And wealth comes through transformation. It's literally the natal promise. So now what I wanted to do, alright, I want to go over some really cool stuff. I want to give an advanced historiography of astrology from the Enlightenment to quantum paradigms. An advanced institute monograph submitted for advanced astrological studies, historiography module, theme, the evolution of astrological praxis and its role in shaping human history. Okay? Let me explain. This historiography traces the evolution of Western astrology from its post-Enlightenment marginalization through its contemporary resurgence as a transmaterialist science incorporating quantum mechanics and multidimensional theory. Rather than presenting a linear decline narrative, we demonstrate that astrology has undergone continuous transformation, adapting its methods and philosophical frameworks to each epoch's dominant epistemologies. Central to this investigation is the role of astrologers as counselors to power, from Roman emperors to Renaissance princes, from Civil War generals to modern heads of state. By examining what these celestial counselors did, how they practiced, and why their counsel was sought, we illuminate astrology's persistent function as a technology of decision-making, legitimation, and meaning-making across human history. This essay culminates in an examination of archetypal astrology and its resonance with quantum field theory, positioning contemporary astrology as a sophisticated, symbolic language for navigating a multi-dimensional cosmos. Okay? Let's get into our theoretical framework. Talking about astrological historiography and the problem of linearity. So really quick, we explore that the historiography of astrology has long been trapped in what we might call the decline and fall narrative. The assumption that astrology's influence inevitably waned with the rise of Enlightenment rationalism and Copernican astronomy. This framework, inherited from 19th century positivist historians, obscures more than it reveals. Contemporary scholars such as Omri Elisha have proposed an alternative framework, astrological historicity, a temporal orientation that simultaneously embraces linear historical consciousness and nonlinear cyclical patterns of recurrence and synchronicity. This framework recognizes that astrology has never been a static tradition, but a dynamic epistemic practice that continuously reinvents itself while maintaining continuity within its ancient roots. All right? As Paola Zambelli's magisterial studies demonstrate, astrologers throughout history have functioned not merely as diviners, but as theorists of history itself. Interpreting planetary cycles is keys to understanding the rise and fall of empires, the emergence of new religious movements, and the unfolding of collective human destiny. This dual role, counselor to princes and philosopher of time, positions the astrologer as a unique figure at the intersection of power and meaning. Of course, we have our ancient foundations, the astrologer as imperial counselor. The pattern of astrologers serving powerful figures was well established long before the Enlightenment. Understanding this foundation is essential for grasping later developments. Thrasyllus and the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Perhaps the most influential astrologer in Roman history was Thrasyllus of Mendes, 36 CE, personal astrologer to the Emperor Tiberius. The historian Tacitus records that Tiberius, during his self-imposed exile on Rhodes, studied astrology under Thrasyllus and tested his skill by asking him to predict the fates of those who would succeed him. So here's what Thrasyllus did specifically. He casted horoscopes for Tiberius and members of the imperial family. He advised on propitious timing for political decisions. He legitimated Tiberius's rule through celestial confirmation, and he trained his son Balbillus to succeed him as imperial astrologer. Here's how he did it. Using Hellenistic techniques including the ascendant, planetary sect, and zodiacal releasing, methods reconstructed in detail by contemporary scholar Chris Brennan, the success of Thrasyllus and his son established a 75-year dynasty of astrological counsel at the highest levels of Roman power. So let's talk about the method, which is horary and natal astrology. Imperial astrologers employ two primary modalities: natal astrology, which is the casting and interpretation of birth charts to understand inherent character, destiny, and vulnerabilities. Tiberius's chart, for instance, was read to identify periods of danger or opportunity. What is horary astrology? Answering specific questions by casting a chart for the moment the question was asked. Roman generals routinely consulted astrologers before battles, sieges, and political maneuvers. The case of Marcus Claudius Marcellus at Syracuse, 212 BCE, illustrates the intelligence gathering function. By knowing that the city's defenders would be distracted during a religious festival, information derived from astrological calendars, he timed his assault for maximum advantage. Now let's get into medieval and Renaissance flowering the astrologer as a court intellectual. The medieval and Renaissance periods represent astrology's golden age as an integral part of learned culture, inseparable from astronomy, medicine, and natural philosophy. We talk about Pietro de Abano, medical astrology, and the university tradition. The Italian philosopher and physician Pietro de Abano, 1257 through 1315, exemplifies the medieval astrologer's integration into academic and courtly life. A professor at the University of Padua, de Abano authored influential works on medical astrology, arguing that planetary positions were essential for diagnosing illness and determining treatment timing. Here's what de Abano did specifically. He developed sophisticated theories of astrological influence on health. He compiled astrological texts, later collected in the Liber Physiognomiae, advised patients and patrons on medical decisions based on celestial configurations, and he bridged Greek, Arabic, and Latin astrological traditions. Here's how he did it. De Abano employed electional astrology, choosing optimal times for medical procedures, purgings, and pharmaceutical preparations. His approach assumed a cosmos where celestial and bodily humors resonated sympathetically, a framework derived from Galenic medicine and Aristotelian physics. Despite his academic standing, de Abano's astrological practice drew suspicion. He appeared before the Inquisition twice, and his body was posthumously burned, a fate shared by many medieval astrologers who navigated the dangerous waters between sanctioned natural philosophy and condemned divination. The Este family, astrology at the Renaissance court. So the Este dynasty of Ferrara provides an extraordinary case study of astrology's integration into Renaissance court life. The Liber Physiognomiae, an illuminated manuscript created around 1440 for an este patron, reveals the sophisticated technical apparatus available to Renaissance astrologers. Leonello d'Este, 1407 through 1450, Marquis of Ferrara famously adjusted his wardrobe colors according to the ruling planet of the day, a practice documented in contemporary sources. The seemingly trivial detail reveals a deeper truth. Astrological principles govern not only major political decisions, but the daily texture of courtly life. The Este astrologers employed volvels, rotating paper calculators affixed to manuscript pages, to determine planetary positions, sunrise times, and other data essential for chart calculation. These devices represent early examples of analog computing, transforming abstract astronomical data into practical tools for decision making. So here's what Renaissance court astrologers did. Well, they casted horoscopes for births, marriages, and diplomatic negotiations. They selected auspicious dates for battles, treaties, and ceremonial events. They advised on the astrological signatures of potential allies and enemies. They legitimated dynastic claims through celestial confirmation, and they produced lavish illuminated manuscripts demonstrating astrological sophistication. How they did it? Well, Renaissance astrologers synthesized Ptolemaic techniques from the Tetrabiblos, Arabic innovations, such as the theory of great conjunctions and medieval developments in house division and aspect interpretation. The result was a complex, multi-layered interpretive system capable of addressing virtually any question of statecraft. The Great Conjunction controversy of 1524. So one of the most remarkable episodes in Renaissance astrology was the widespread panic surrounding the Great Conjunction of 1524, when all 7 known planets aligned in Pisces, an event astrologers predicted would cause catastrophic floods, earthquakes, and social upheaval. Here's what the astrologers did. Well, hundreds of astrological booklets were printed across Europe, each offering predictions based on the impending conjunction. The advent of the Gutenberg press transformed astrology from a courtly secret to a mass medium, with astrologers competing to publish the most compelling forecasts. How they did it? Astrologers employed conjunction theory, which interpreted Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions as markers of major historical transitions. The 1524 conjunction was unprecedented in its planetary participation, leading to predictions of global catastrophe. So the outcome was what? Well, February 1524 proved remarkably mild, discrediting many astrologers. Yet the episode reveals how thoroughly astrological thinking permeated Renaissance culture, and how astrologers functioned as public intellectuals whose pronouncements shaped collective expectations and behaviors. The early modern crucible, astrologers in an age of revolution. So, the 16th and 17th centuries represent a paradoxical period. Even as Copernican astronomy undermined Ptolemaic cosmology, astrologers maintained and even expanded their influence at the highest levels of power. So who was Kepler, the astronomer who cast horoscopes? Johannes Kepler, 1571 through 1630, one of history's greatest astronomers, served as imperial mathematician and reluctantly as a court astrologer to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. His case epitomizes the complex relationship between the new astronomy and traditional astrology. So what did Kepler do specifically? He casted horoscopes for Emperor Rudolf II and other nobles. He produced annual astrological predictions, practicals. He advised on the astrological timing of political and military decisions. He attempted to reform astrology on more rational principles. And how he did it? Well, Kepler approached astrology critically, but pragmatically. He famously described astrology as the foolish little daughter of astronomy that nonetheless provided necessary income. Yet his correspondence reveals genuine engagement with astrological ideas, including his conviction that planetary aspects produce corresponding effects in the human soul. Kepler's most famous client was the military commander Albrecht von Wallenstein, for whom he cast a horoscope in 1608 and revised in 1625. The chart's prediction of dangers in the 33rd, 34th, and 35th years of his life proved remarkably accurate. Wallenstein was assassinated at age 49 during a period Kepler had identified as critical. William Lilly, the astrologer who shaped English history. Perhaps no astrologer in history has exercised greater political influence than William Lilly, 1602 through 1681, whose career spanned the English Civil War, Commonwealth, and Restoration. So what did William Lilly do? Well, he published annual almanacs read by hundreds of thousands. He advised parliamentary leaders, including Oliver Cromwell. He predicted key military outcomes, including parliamentary victories. He interrogated royalist spies through astrological means. He received a pension of $100 annually from Cromwell's Council of State, and he maintained influence with Charles II after the Restoration, or 100 pounds, if you will. So how did he do it? Well, William Lilly, he mastered horary astrology, answering specific questions based on charts cast for the moment of inquiry. His Christian Astrology, 1647, the first major astrological work published in English, remains a foundational text. Lilly's method emphasized rigorous chart calculation combined with intuitive synthesis, a balance he described as judgment. The case of the Battle of Naseby, 1645, illustrates Lilly's practical value. Before the decisive parliamentary victory, Lilly cast a chart indicating success for the parliamentary forces. His published prediction bolstered parliamentary morale, while he undermined royalist confidence, an early example of psychological warfare through astrological intelligence. Lilly's survival through multiple regime changes testifies to his political acumen. He served Cromwell's Commonwealth while maintaining contacts with royalist astrologers, positioning himself as a neutral expert whose services transcended factional loyalties. Now we get into the critique emerging, Bacon, Swift, and the new epistemology. Even as astrologers wielded unprecedented influence, the philosophical foundations of their practice faced mounting criticism. Francis Bacon, 1561 through 1626, yes, it was a real person, sought not to abolish astrology but to reform it, to purge it of superstition while preserving what he considered its legitimate core. His approach exemplifies the early modern attempt to separate natural astrology, concerned with weather, medicine, and agriculture, from judicial astrology, concerned with individual fate and political events. Jonathan Swift, 1667 through 1745, delivered the more decisive blow through satire. His prediction for the year 1708 by Isaac Bickerstaff pretended to be an astrological almanac predicting the death of John Partridge, a popular astrologer. When Partridge protested that he was still alive, Swift's collaborators published a mock account of Partridge's death, demonstrating the absurdity of astrological claims through practical joke rather than philosophical argument. Swift's satire succeeded where rational critique had failed by exposing astrology's vulnerability to empirical disconfirmation. Yet astrology survived, retreating from elite circles to popular culture, a migration that would shape its 18th and 19th century trajectory. Let's talk about the long eclipse, astrology in the age of reason and progress. The 18th and 19th centuries represent astrology's period of deepest marginalization from mainstream intellectual life, though it never disappeared entirely. So from court to cottage, the democratization of astrology. With the decline of court patronage, astrologers found new audiences among the emerging middle classes. Almanacs, cheap annual publications combining astrological predictions with practical information, reached enormous audiences throughout Europe and America. Here's what almanac astrologers did. They produced annual predictions for weather, crops, and health. They offered character readings based on zodiac signs. They provided electional advice for planting, bloodletting, and travel. They maintained astrological literacy among popular audiences. And how did they do it? Almanac astrology simplified the complex techniques of court astrology into accessible formats. So sun sign astrology, the practice of making predictions based solely on solar position, emerged during this period as a democratic alternative to the expensive individualized chart. The Theosophical Revival, astrology as esoteric philosophy. The late 19th century witnessed astrology's reemergence within the context of a cult revival. The Theosophical Society, founded in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky and Henry Olcott, incorporated astrology into its syncretic esoteric system. So what did theosophical astrologers do? They synthesized Western astrological traditions with Eastern spiritual concepts. They developed theories of planetary influence based on etheric vibrations. They connected astrology to karma and reincarnation. They produced sophisticated philosophical defenses of astrological principles. And how they did it? Well, theosophical astrologers rejected mechanistic models of celestial influence in favor of correspondence. The idea that celestial and terrestrial realms mirror each other through sympathetic resonance. This framework, derived from Hermetic and Neoplatonic sources, positioned astrology as a spiritual discipline rather than a predictive technology. Let's talk about the 20th century Renaissance, from psychology to quantum paradigms. So the 20th century witnessed astrology's most dramatic transformation since the Renaissance, as it absorbed and integrated developments in depth psychology, quantum physics, and systems theory. Talk about Carl Gustav Jung, synchronicity, and the astrological bridge. The Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, 1875 through 1961, provided astrology with its most sophisticated modern philosophical foundation through his theory of synchronicity and a causal connecting principle linking psychological states with external events. So what did Jung do? He conducted a lot of statistical studies of astrological aspects in marriage charts. He developed the concept of archetypes that would transform astrological theory. He corresponded with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli on the relationship between psyche and matter, and he used astrological charts in clinical practice with patients. And how he did it? Well, Jung distinguished synchronicity from causality. Planets do not cause psychological states, rather celestial configurations and human experiences are meaningfully connected through a common underlying order. And this framework preserved astrology's interpretive power while freeing it from mechanistic causation. The collaboration between Jung and the Nobel laureate physicist Wolfgang Pauli proved particularly significant. Pauli, who had deep personal engagement with dreams and archetypes, edited Jung's monograph on synchronicity, ensuring its coherence with insights from relativity and quantum field theory. Let's talk about Dane Rudar and the planetarization of consciousness. So the French-born American astrologer Dane Rudar, 1895 through 1985, revolutionized astrological practice by synthesizing Jungian psychology, humanistic philosophy, and Eastern spirituality. So Dane Rudar rejected fatalistic prediction in favor of humanistic, person-centered astrology. He developed the concept of the birth chart as a seed pattern of potential. He connected individual charts to collective planetary evolution, and he introduced the term planetarization of consciousness. And how he did it? Well, Dane Rudar's humanistic astrology treated the chart not as a fateful destiny, but as a symbolic map of individual purpose. The astrologer's role was not to predict, but to counsel, to help clients understand and actualize their inherent potential. Rudar's framework proved enormously influential, shaping the therapeutic turn in late 20th century astrology and positioning astrologers as spiritual counselors rather than prognosticators. Now let's talk about Richard Tarnas, archetypal astrology, and the Copernican reversal. So, the philosopher and cultural historian Richard Tarnas has developed the most sophisticated contemporary synthesis of astrology, depth psychology, and cosmological philosophy. His work, developed in collaboration with Stanislav Grof, represents a paradigm shift in astrological theory. Specifically, what Tarnas did, he developed archetypal astrology, which correlates planetary movements with archetypal themes in collective and individual experience. He conducted extensive empirical research on planetary alignments and historical cultural phenomena. He positioned astrology as the Rosetta Stone of the human psyche. He proposed a Copernican reversal, recognizing the human psyche's participation in cosmic meaning. And how he did it, Tarnas's method involves archetypal historiography, correlating multiple year outer planetary alignments with waves of archetypal expression in history. So for example, Uranus-Pluto alignments correlate with revolutionary upheaval, Saturn-Pluto alignments with authoritarian backlash and collective crises. Tarnas draws a powerful analogy between quantum probability fields and astrological influence, just as an electron exists as a probability cloud until observation collapses it into a specific location. Planetary archetypes represent probability fields of potential expression that manifest differently in each individual and context. This framework positions astrology as a transmaterialist science compatible with the most advanced physics. Wolfgang Pauli and the quantum astrological synthesis. So the Pauli-Jung collaboration deserves particular attention for its implications for astrological theory. Pauli, one of quantum mechanics' founders, was deeply interested in the relationship between psyche and matter, what he called the unus mundus, or unitary reality underlying both. So here's what Pauli did. He explored the psychological significance of Kepler's astrological work. He corresponded with Jung on synchronicity and archetypes. He developed the concept of neutral language, bridging physics and psychology, and he recognized astrology as an early expression of the archetypal worldview. Pauli distinguished between formal and final causes in nature. While physics describes formal causation, how events unfold, astrology addresses final causation, why events have meaning. Both perspectives, he argued, are necessary for a complete understanding of reality. The contemporary synthesis, quantum fields, and multidimensional astrology. The early 21st century has witnessed the emergence of sophisticated frameworks integrating astrology with quantum mechanics, systems theory, and multidimensional cosmology. Planetary archetypes as quantum fields. Contemporary theorists have developed detailed mappings between planetary archetypes and quantum concepts. So we're going to go over the Sun through Pluto, essentially planet archetypal function, quantum analogy. So for the Sun, core identity, vitality, energy source, fusion reactions. The Moon is emotions, rhythm, phase change materials, liquid crystals. Mars is force, action hardness, catalysts, explosives. Mercury is communication, semiconductors, signal processors. Jupiter is expansion, superconductors, growth catalysts. Venus is bonding, value resonant materials, molecular bonds. Saturn is structure, limitation, crystalline lattice, insulators. And Uranus is innovation, disruption, superconductors, critical threshold. Neptune is dissolution, spirituality, quantum fluids, and membranes. And Pluto is transformation, regeneration, radioactive isotopes, and nuclear processes. Essentially, this mapping suggests that planetary archetypes represent fundamental principles of cosmic organization manifesting differently across physical, psychological, and social domains. Let's talk about superposition and the collapse of meaning. So the quantum concept of superposition provides a powerful model for astrological interpretation. Just as quantum particles exist in multiple potential states until observation collapses them into specific outcomes, planetary archetypes exist as fields of potential meaning until interpreted within the context of an individual chart and life. What contemporary astrologers do? Well, they interpret planetary placements as probability fields rather than fixed determinants. They recognize the observers, astrologers, and clients' participation in meaning creation. They synthesize multiple factors, the signs, houses, aspects, transits, into coherent narratives, and they honor the client's agency in actualizing astrological potentials. So how do they do it? Contemporary methods integrate traditional techniques, house division, aspect calculation with modern psychological and philosophical frameworks. The astrologer becomes a co-participant in meaning-making rather than an authoritative predictor. Let's talk about multidimensional cosmology in the astrological universe. So if string theory and M theory are correct, our universe possesses 10 or 11 dimensions, far more than the 3 spatial dimensions we perceive. This multidimensional framework resonates profoundly with astrological tradition. Astrology has always operated with an implicit multidimensional model. The 4th dimension, time, astrological charts incorporate time as essential variable. 5th dimension, probability, charts represent probability fields, not fixed outcomes. 6th dimension, collective, mundane astrology addresses collective consciousness. 7th and beyond, archetypal, pure archetypal realms underlying manifestation. In this view, planets are not distant physical bodies exerting force, but nodes of resonance connecting different dimensional levels. Their positions in 3-dimensional space index deeper multidimensional realities. Let's talk about some case studies in Celestial Council, what astrologers actually did. Having traced astrology's theoretical evolution, we now examine specific cases of astrologers serving power, focusing on what they did and how they did it. So the imperial astrologer, Thrasyllus and Tiberius, what he did, cast horoscopes for imperial succession, identified periods of danger and opportunity, legitimated Tiberius's rule, and established dynastic succession in astrological practice. How did he do it? Hellenistic techniques, including ascendant determination, planetary sect analysis, day-night charts, zodiacal releasing for timing predictions, and psychological insight combined with technical skill. And let's talk about why it even mattered. Thrasyllus' council helped stabilize the Julio-Claudian succession during one of Rome's most precarious periods. His influence established astrology as an accepted tool of imperial governance. The military astrologer, William Lilly, in the English Civil War. What did he do? Well, he predicted parliamentary military victories. He interrogated royalist prisoners through horary. He advised Cromwell on strategic timing, and he published propaganda undermining royalist confidence. How did he do it? Horary astrology for specific questions, electional astrology for battle timing, mundane astrology for national trends, and strategic publication timing for maximum psychological impact. Why did it matter? Well, Lilly's predictions shaped military and political outcomes by influencing morale and decision-making at critical junctures. His pension from Cromwell's government acknowledged astrology's practical value to the state. Talking about the scientific astrologer, Kepler and Wallenstein, what did he do? Well, he casted Wallenstein's horoscope, 1608 and 1625, identified critical periods in the general's life. He provided astrological counsel alongside astronomical calculation. He did it using Kepler's own harmonic aspects theory, traditional house and planetary interpretation, integration of astronomical precision with astrological symbolism. And why did it matter? Well, Wallenstein, one of the 30 Years' War's most powerful figures, governed his actions partly by astrological counsel. Kepler's charts influenced the commander whose decisions shape European history. The medical astrologer, Pietro de Abano, in medieval medicine. Again, what did he do? Well, he diagnosed illness through celestial configuration. He selected treatment timing based on planetary hours. He advised patients on health maintenance. And he did it with medical astrology, integrating Galenic humoral theory, decumbiture charts for illness onset, electional astrology for medical procedures. Why did it matter? Well, Diabano's integration of astrology into university medicine legitimated astrological practice within the academy and influenced medical treatment for centuries. All right. Now we're talking about the court astrologer, the Este family counselors. What did they do? They casted horoscopes for dynastic births and marriages, selected auspicious dates for diplomatic events, created illuminated manuscripts demonstrating astrological sophistication. And they did it using volvels for calculation efficiency, integration of Greek, Arabic, and Latin traditions, and beautiful manuscript production for patronage maintenance. Excuse me. So why did it matter? Because Este astrologers helped legitimate and whoa. Este astrologers helped legitimate and guide one of Renaissance Italy's most influential dynasties, demonstrating astrology's integration into the fabric of courtly life. Alright, now let's talk about the astrologer's toolkit, methods through history. Across these diverse cases, certain methodological patterns recur. For example, natal astrology. Natal astrology is simply just gene teleology, casting charts for births, interpreting character and destiny, identifying critical life periods. Horary astrology, answering specific questions, casting charts for the moment of inquiry applied to politics, war, love, and business. Electional astrology, selecting optimal times for actions, battles, marriages, coronations, medical procedures, maximizing favorable influences. Mundane astrology, interpreting collective and world events, great conjunctions, eclipses, ingresses, predicting wars, plagues, and political transitions. Medical astrology, mathematics, diagnosing through celestial configuration, timing treatments and procedures, integrating with humoral theory. And then interrogational astrology, assessing character and intentions of others, used in diplomacy and espionage, determining trustworthiness of allies and enemies. Now, our conclusion for this section is the eternal return of celestial counsel. This historiography has demonstrated that astrology, far from being a static superstition, has continuously evolved in response to changing intellectual and cultural contexts. From the imperial courts of Rome to the quantum laboratories of the 20th century, astrologers have adapted their methods while maintaining continuity with ancient traditions. Several patterns emerge from this history. First, astrologers have consistently served power, whether advising Roman emperors, Renaissance princes, or Civil War generals. Celestial counselors have provided decision makers with frameworks for navigating uncertainty and legitimation for controversial choices. Second, astrological practice has always been technically sophisticated. From Ptolemaic calculation through Renaissance volvos to contemporary software, astrologers have employed the most advanced computational tools available to their epochs. Alright, third, astrology has repeatedly integrated new philosophical frameworks, Aristotelian physics, Neoplatonic emanationism, Jungian psychology, and quantum field theory have all been absorbed and transformed within astrological tradition. Fourth, the astrologer's role has oscillated between prophet and counselor, predictor and interpreter. Contemporary practice emphasizes the latter, helping clients navigate probability fields rather than announcing fixed fates. So the quantum and multidimensional frameworks emerging in contemporary theory suggest that astrology's ancient intuition that celestial patterns meaningfully correlate with human experience may find validation in the most advanced physics. As Wolfgang Pauli recognized, the division between psyche and matter, meaning and mechanism, may be a function of limited perspective rather than fundamental reality. In this light, the astrologer emerges not as a primitive survival from a superstitious age, but as an early explorer of dimensions we are only beginning to map scientifically. The celestial counselors of the past were not wrong to see meaning in the stars. They were seeing through symbolic language the same interconnected multidimensional reality that quantum physics now describes mathematically. This historiography offers both validation and challenge. Validation that our tradition rests on sophisticated foundations, and challenge to continue evolving, to integrate new knowledge while honoring ancient wisdom, to serve as celestial counselors for an age that desperately needs meaning, connection, and guidance through the probability fields of an uncertain future. All right. Now we're going to get into something a little bit similar, but not really. Alright. Because I'm still going to be talking about, of course, astrology, but this time I want to get into astrological historiography through the lens of quantum field theory and nonlinear dynamics, essentially proposing a radical reconceptualization of astrological historiography. And rather than tracing a linear development from superstition to science, we can understand the history of astrology as a fractal recursion of core insights across different scales of time and culture. Drawing on quantum field theory, nonlinear dynamics, and complexity science, I argue that astrological knowledge has evolved through a series of phase transitions in which the same archetypal patterns re-emerge at higher levels of organizational complexity. The history of astrological practice, from Mesopotamian omen divination to contemporary archetypal astrology, exhibits the mathematical properties of self-similarity, sensitivity to initial conditions, and emergence that characterize complex adaptive systems. This framework reveals that the apparent discontinuities in astrological history, the Enlightenment critique, the Theosophical revival, the Jungian synthesis are not ruptures but bifurcations, moments when the system reorganized at a higher level of complexity while preserving its essential structure. So, we're going beyond linear historiography because traditional histories of astrology have been imprisoned by linear narratives, whether framed as decline and fall, the Enlightenment view, or progressive revelation, the esoteric view. These narratives impose a false coherence on a far more complex reality. The historical record reveals not a single trajectory, but a multidimensional manifold of practices, theories, and institutions evolving across cultures and centuries. So we're going to offer the alternative, a nonlinear historiography grounded in the mathematical frameworks of quantum field theory and complexity science. Just as quantum mechanics reveals that particles are not discrete objects but probability fields in continuous interaction, astrological traditions are not discrete entities but fields of meaning that overlap, interfere, and transform across historical space-time. First, we dissect quantum fields, fractals, and historical process, with A being the quantum field model of cultural transmission. In quantum field theory, the universe is understood as a continuum of interacting fields. Right? Particles are not fundamental, they are excitations of underlying fields. The electron, for instance, is a localized vibration in the electron field. We're applying this model to astrological historiography. Astrological traditions are fields of meaning and practice. Individual astrologers are excitations or quanta of these fields. Historical periods represent different energy states or configurations. Cultural transmission is field interaction and interference. This model explains how astrological knowledge can persist through centuries of suppression. The field remains even when particular excitations practitioners are eliminated. Fractal self-similarity in astrological history. Fractals are mathematical structures that exhibit self-similarity across scales. Coastline looks similarly complex whether viewed from orbit or from ground level. The same pattern recurs at every magnification. Astrological history exhibits fractal properties. And I'll do some scale example recurring patterns. So for example, we have millennial Mesopotamian leading to Hellenistic, leading to medieval, leading to modern integration of celestial observation with meaning making. Then we have centennial Renaissance courts, leading to Enlightenment salons, leading to Victorian drawing rooms, leading to internet forums, astrologers serving as counselors to power. Generational, each generation's astrological innovators, synthesis of traditional techniques with contemporary frameworks. For example, individual, each astrologer's career arc could be from training to practice to innovation to legacy. And the pattern recurs because it reflects fundamental structures of human cognition and social organization, what Jung would call archetypes. Sensitivity to initial conditions and historical bifurcations. Chaos theory's butterfly effect states that small differences in initial conditions can produce dramatically different outcomes. Historical systems exhibit similar sensitivity. The history of astrology is marked by bifurcation points, moments when small perturbations redirected entire traditions. The translation movement of 8th through 10th century Baghdad, the printing press revolution of the 15th century, the Enlightenment critique of the 18th century, the Theosophical synthesis of the 19th century, and the Jungian integration of the 20th century. At each bifurcation, astrological knowledge reorganized around new attractors while maintaining continuity with its past. Alright. Now, let's talk about phase transitions in astrological history. So we're drawing on condensed matter physics. We can understand major historical shifts as phase transitions, reorganizations of system structure at critical thresholds. So our first transition, phase transition 1, from Mesopotamia to Hellenistic astrology, circa 500 through 100 BCE, with the initial state Mesopotamian omen astrology, celestial events as direct messages from gods interpreted through accumulated observation. In the critical threshold, Alexander's conquests create cultural contact between Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Greek traditions. And the phase transition, synthesis of Mesopotamian observation with Greek natural philosophy, development of the natal chart as a mathematical construct, emergence of the astrologer as a professional counselor rather than priestly diviner, and codification in Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. And the new state, Hellenistic astrology, a systematic, rationalized discipline integrating astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. Phase transition 2, the Arabic synthesis, 8th through 10th centuries, late Hellenistic astrology, preserved and transformed in Byzantine and Sasanian contexts. The Abbasid translation movement gathers texts from Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Indian sources into Baghdad's House of Wisdom. We get into our phase transition, integration of Indian nakshatras and Arabic lots, development of the Great Conjunction theory of history, refinement of horary and electional techniques, preservation and expansion of astrological mathematics. In the new state becomes medieval Arabic astrology, more technically sophisticated and historically oriented than its predecessors. Phase transition 3, the Renaissance integration, 15th through 16th centuries, medieval astrology transmitted through Arabic sources to Latin Christendom, recovery of Greek texts, invention of printing, discovery of the New World. And we look at our phase transition, synthesis of Arabic techniques with recovered Ptolemaic and Hermetic sources, integration of astrology with Neoplatonic magic and natural philosophy, democratization through printed almanacs and ephemerides, astrology as courtly art and political technology. And the new state becomes Renaissance astrology, more philosophically ambitious and publicly accessible than medieval practice. Phase transition 4, the psychological term, the 20th century, 19th century popular astrology, simplified and commercialized as the initial state. The critical threshold is Jung synchronicity theory, theosophical revival, depth psychology. And the phase transition involves rejection of mechanistic causation in favor of meaningful correlation, integration of archetypal psychology, shift from prediction to counseling, recovery of traditional techniques within modern frameworks. And the new state becomes contemporary astrology, psychologically sophisticated, philosophically grounded, technically eclectic. Now our fifth phase transition, the quantum synthesis, which is the 21st century. And our initial state is the late 20th century psychological astrology. Our critical threshold is the integration with quantum field theory, complexity science, and multidimensional cosmology. In our phase transition, emerging, understanding planetary influences as probability fields rather than deterministic forces, recognition of the observer's role in meaning creation, integration with non-local consciousness research, multidimensional models incorporating string and M theory. The new state becomes quantum astrology, a transmaterialist science of meaningful correlation across dimensional levels. Quantum coherence and astrological transmission. Quantum coherence describes a state in which quantum systems maintain phase relationships, enabling phenomena like superposition and entanglement. Applied to astrological historiography, this concept illuminates how astrological knowledge maintains integrity through transmission. Coherence through translation. When astrological texts were translated from Greek to Arabic to Latin, they underwent transformation, yet something remained coherent. This coherence is not informational but archetypal. The underlying patterns survive translation because they correspond to fundamental structures of cosmic and human experience. Talk about decoherent and recorrelation. So quantum systems lose coherence through interaction with environments. Astrological traditions similarly experience decoherence during periods of suppression or neglect, yet decoherence is not destruction, information is merely dispersed. The theosophical revival of the 19th century represents a recorrelation, a gathering of dispersed information into new coherent structures, like quantum error correction. The tradition repaired itself through redundancy in its information encoding. Non-local connections. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles once connected remain connected across any distance. Astrological history reveals analogous non-local connections. Renaissance Magi recovering ancient teachings that resonated with her contemporary insights. 19th century occultists independently arriving at similar synthesis. Contemporary practitioners rediscovering techniques from multiple traditions simultaneously. These non-local connections suggest that astrological knowledge exists not only in texts and traditions, but in a morphic field accessible across time and space. The multidimensional historiography, integrating string theory and M theory. If string theory's extra dimensions are real, then historical processes may be influenced by dynamics occurring in dimensions we cannot directly perceive. Let's talk about the bulk and the brain. In M theory, our universe is a 3-brain embedded in a higher dimensional bulk. Other brains may exist parallel to our own. In applying that to historiography, it's visible history, texts, events, individuals occurring on our historical brain. Invisible influences, archetypal patterns, collective unconscious morphic resonance may originate in the bulk. Synchronicities represent intersections between brain dynamics and bulk influences. This model explains how astrological patterns can be simultaneously consistent across cultures and yet differently expressed. The same bulk dynamics produce different manifestations on different cultural brains. Compactified dimensions of historical process. The extra dimensions of string theory are compactified, curled up so small we cannot perceive them directly, yet their geometry determines the fundamental constants of our universe. Historical processes similarly have compactified dimensions, structural factors too large or too deep to perceive directly that nevertheless shape visible events. Economic structures, the mode of production, epistemic frameworks, the structure of knowledge, archetypal patterns, the structure of collective consciousness, planetary cycles, the structure of cosmic timing. Astrologers have always attended to these compactified dimensions, reading visible events as expressions of invisible structures. Let's talk about the holographic principle and historical information. The holographic principle suggests that all information in a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary. Applied to history, this suggests that all historical information is present at every moment, but most of it is inaccessible due to dimensional constraints. Astrological practice can be understood as a technology for accessing this holographic information. The birth chart is not a snapshot, but a holographic encoding of the entire universe's state at a particular space-time coordinate. Let's observe a case study, which is the Great Conjunction tradition as fractal recursion. The interpretation of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions provides a perfect case study of fractal recursion in astrological history. So, Mesopotamian origins, circa 2000 BCE. Jupiter and Saturn were recognized as significant celestial powers. Their rare conjunctions were noted as omens for kings and kingdoms. Arabic development, 9th century CE. Abu Mashar developed the Great Conjunction theory, correlating conjunctions with the rise and fall of dynasties, religions, and empires. He established a systematic framework linking conjunction cycles to historical periods. Renaissance elaboration, 15th through 16th centuries. European astrologers integrated Abu Masar's framework with Christian theology and classical philosophy. Conjunctions were interpreted as markers of apocalyptic significance, fueling both expectation and anxiety. Modern recursion, 20th through the 21st centuries. Contemporary archetypal astrologers have recovered and refined conjunction theory, correlating Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions with generational shifts in collective consciousness. The 2020 conjunction in Aquarius, for instance, has been interpreted as marking the transition from the Piscean to the Aquarian age. And then we have our fractal analysis. Each level of this tradition exhibits the same pattern: observation of celestial cycles, correlation with historical events, systematization into predictive frameworks, application to contemporary situations, and transmission to subsequent generations. The pattern recurs across millennia because it reflects the fundamental structure of how humans make meaning from celestial order. Quantum historiography, the observer effect in historical writing. Quantum mechanics demonstrates that the observer affects the observed. The act of measurement collapses the wave function into a particular state. Historical writing exhibits a parallel observer effect. The historian's perspective, questions, and frameworks shape the history that emerges. There is no neutral, objective historical account, only probability fields collapsed into narratives through the act of observation. The historiographical wave function. So before observation, historical possibility exists as a wave function, a superposition of potential narratives. The historian's intervention collapses this wave function into a particular story. Complementary historiographies. Quantum complementarity states that certain properties cannot be observed simultaneously. Position and momentum, for instance, are complementary. Measuring one precludes measuring the other. Historical understanding exhibits similar complementarity. Individual and collective perspectives cannot be simultaneously optimized. Structural and event-based histories obscure each other. Internal and external accounts exclude complementary information. Multiple astrological historiographies are not competing for truth, but revealing complementary aspects of a multi-dimensional reality. Our entangled histories. Quantum entanglement connects particles across distance. Astrological traditions exhibit historical entanglement. The fates of different traditions remain connected even after separation. Western and Indian astrology, for instance, share common origins and continue to influence each other across cultural boundaries. Now we conclude toward a quantum historiography of astrology. What did I just propose in the last hour? Well, a framework for understanding the astrological history through the lens of quantum field theory, fractal geometry, and multidimensional cosmology, and the key insights include: astrological traditions are fields, not fixed entities, continuously transforming through interaction. Historical patterns are fractal, recurring across scales of time and culture. Phase transitions reorganize astrological knowledge at critical thresholds. Quantum coherence maintains archetypal patterns through transmission. Multidimensional dynamics shape visible history from compactified depths. The observer effect implicates historians in the history they construct. This framework liberates astrological historiography from linear narratives while honoring the tradition of astrology's continuity. It reveals that the history of astrology is not a story of decline and recovery, but a fractal recursion of core insights across ever-increasing complexity, a cosmic dance in which the same patterns recur at higher and higher levels of organization, approaching asymptotically the eternal archetypes they express. The next phase transition awaits as quantum and multidimensional frameworks mature. Astrological historiography will integrate these insights, revealing ever deeper connections between celestial order and human meaning. All right. Alright, this is what we'll do. We're going to move from that into integrated computational astrology, archetypal correlation, multi-messenger synthesis, the quantum archetypal era, if you will. So the goal of this is there's a 63-year window we're experiencing, of course, starting next year, 2027 through 2090. 63-year window represents one of the most astrologically significant epochs in recorded human history, marked by the completion of multiple outer planetary cycles, the full integration of AI into predictive methodology, and the emergence of what we term the quantum archetypal synthesis in astrological practice. All right. And what I'm getting at with these reports really quick, these aren't predictions in the deterministic sense, but rather probability field mappings, carefully calibrated assessments of archetypal pressures, collective phase transitions, and the windows of possibility that will shape human experience over the coming decades, with respect and celestial alignment. Department of Longitudinal Predictive Methodology. And what I'll do is explain here. Just gonna show you guys. So we have 4 reports to go over, and then I will conclude this video, this episode. So our first report is 2027 through 2035. The Pluto and Aquarius acceleration. What's really going to happen? So the thing is, Pluto in Aquarius is going to fuck us really, really hard. For some of us, it's already fucked us permanently. But the rest of us, it'll start to show itself some more. So our key planetary configurations, we have Pluto in Aquarius, of course. This already happened 2024. It started to ingress, and it's not leaving until 2044. We have a Saturn, Neptune, Aries ingress, and Uranus in Gemini. So this is showing us right off the bat our archetypal signature is revolutionary restructuring of collective intelligence systems. The 2027 through 2035 period represents the critical acceleration phase of Pluto's transit through Aquarius, a 70-year cycle that will fundamentally restructure humanity's relationship with technology, collective intelligence, and democratic governance. Our field observations confirm that this transit isn't merely influencing technological development, but is actively reshaping the informational substrate of human civilization as we know it. Now let's look at our key findings. We know there's the integration of AI into astrological practice, and it's going to reach its full maturation by 2029 with AI systems not merely calculating charts but participating in interpretive synthesis. Cross-cultural astrological harmonization becomes a recognized academic discipline with the Astro-AI framework, achieving maybe 78% predictive accuracy for collective events by 2031. Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries catalyzes a fundamental reevaluation of spiritual authority, leading to the emergence of what we term techno-mystical religious movements. Now let's look at our predictions for this period and how they employ a three-tiered methodological approach. Our first tier is computational astrology. We can map the probability distributions for all major planetary configurations between 2027 and 2035. Essentially, the system identifies phase transitions, identity inflection points, and narrative boundary conditions with unprecedented precision. Mathematical foundation rests on the principle that whenever systems transition through constrained boundaries, continuity must be preserved, and the redistribution of conjugate variables produces predictable structural behavior. Our second tier is archetypal correlation. We are correlating outer planetary alignments with historical cultural patterns. So Pluto in Aquarius aligns with previous democratic technological revolutions like the American Revolution, French Revolution, Digital Revolution, suggesting an acceleration of collective intelligence infrastructure. And our third tier is multi-messenger integration. We have incorporated data from gamma ray bursts, solar neutrino flux, and gravitational wave detections into our predictive matrices, recognizing that high-energy astrophysical events influence collective consciousness in ways previously unacknowledged. As the multi-messenger astrology framework demonstrates, gamma ray exposure correlates with anger management issues, neutrinos with ghosting behavior, and gravitational waves with relational attraction patterns. Let's give a year-by-year field projections. So we're going to go over 2027 in more detail, 2028, 2029, 2030, and all the way until I think 2035. So really quick, let's go over 2027, which is the informational threshold. In our primary configuration next year is Pluto in Aquarius squaring Jupiter in Taurus. January through August, Uranus in Gemini sextile Rahu in Libra, the north node of the moon. The square between transformative Pluto and expansive Jupiter catalyzes a global debate about the ownership of information. Machine learning models trained on the astrological data sets achieve 72% accuracy in predicting career transitions, validating the computational approach to what we previously considered purely symbolic knowledge. In our probability weight, 0.84 high confidence archetypal interpretation. Jupiter-Pluto square represents the tension between expansion and transformation, between the desire to disseminate knowledge universally and the need to transform the structures through which knowledge is transmitted. This manifests as legislation regulating AI training data and the emergence of data sovereignty moments. And now we jump to 2028, the constitutional crises. Saturn in Aries, squaring Pluto in Aquarius, February through November. Jupiter in Cancer, trining Neptune in Aries. Saturn-Pluto square, historically associated with authoritarian backlash and institutional crises, manifests as a fundamental challenge to democratic governance structures. AI systems trained on cross-cultural astrological data correctly predict 14 of 17 major election outcomes globally, raising questions about the relationship between computational prediction and democratic self-determination. Probability weight 0.79. Saturn, which is structure, authority, and it's square Pluto, transformation, power. During Pluto's Aquarius transit represents the death throes of centralized information control. Institutions that have historically controlled knowledge, like universities and media organizations and governments, face existential challenges from decentralized networks. Let's talk about 2029, the AI integration threshold. Because we have Uranus in Gemini, trining Jupiter in Libra all year, and then Neptune in Aries, sextile Pluto in Aquarius. This year marks the full integration of artificial intelligence into astrological practice. The ensemble-based prediction models developed by Jaganesh and Parameswari achieve 89% accuracy for profession and marriage predictions when trained on datasets exceeding 10,000 complete horoscopes. The random forest and neural network classifiers outperform traditional methods across all validation metrics. So Uranus, innovation and disruption in Gemini, which is information and communication. Trine Jupiter, which is expansion and wisdom, and Libra, which is relationship and balance, creates optimal conditions for the harmonious integration of artificial and human intelligence. The astrologer's role shifts from calculator to interpreter, from generating information to synthesizing meaning. All right? Let's jump to 2030. The Saturn return of the digital age. So Saturn in Aries, opposite Libra, Rahu, Pluto in Aquarius, sextile Chiron in Sagittarius. Saturn's opposition to Rahu represents a collective karmic reckoning. The digital infrastructure built since the early 2000s faces its first systemic crises, not merely technical failure, but philosophical exhaustion. The question, what is the internet for, becomes unavoidable. Saturn returns every 29 years, marking the maturation of systems and institutions. The internet, born in its public form circa 1991, early 90s, experiences its second Saturn return. The first, circa 2020, brought questions of regulation and platform responsibility. The second brings questions of purpose and meaning. Let's talk about 2031. The Astro AI maturity threshold. We have Jupiter in Pisces conjunct Neptune in Aries, and Uranus in Gemini square Saturn in Virgo. I think by 2031, we'll have an astrology AI cross-cultural integration framework achieving full operational capability by harmonizing Chinese, Indian, and Korean astrological traditions with Western computational methods. And the system can achieve 78% accuracy for collective event prediction, significantly exceeding any single tradition baseline. Jupiter conjunct Neptune represents the fusion of expansion and transcendence, the application of systematic knowledge to mystical wisdom. The square between Uranus and Saturn represents the tension between innovation and tradition that characterizes this integrative moment. Let's talk about the Uranus in Cancer ingress 2032. And then Pluto in Aquarius square Venus in Scorpio. So Uranus' entry into Cancer, the sign of home, family, and emotional security, initiates a 20-year cycle of transformation in domestic life. The boundaries between physical and digital family, between biological and chosen kin, between human and artificial companions begin to dissolve. Uranus in Cancer historically correlates with revolutions in domesticity. The last transit in the 1930s brought radio into every home, transforming family life. This transit brings artificial companions, AI-mediated relationships, and the redefinition of what home means. 2033, we have the first Pluto return of the USA. Pluto returns to its natal position in the United States chart. Saturn in Leo square Uranus in Taurus. The United States experiences its first Pluto return, a momentous astrological event occurring only once approximately every 248 years. The nation born under Pluto in Capricorn, July 4th, 1776, faces the fundamental question of its identity. Has it fulfilled its Plutonian destiny of transformation through crises, or is it merely repeating patterns established at its founding? So Pluto returns mark the culmination of generational cycles. Nations, like individuals, face existential reckoning when Pluto returns to its natal position. For the United States, this means confronting the shadow aspects of its founding, the contradictions between stated ideals and actual practices, between democratic rhetoric and plutocratic reality. Real quick, I'll mention previous Pluto returns for major nations include Rome, circa 450 CE, the fall of the Western Empire, and Great Britain, circa 1800, active union and Napoleonic Wars. The United States' return occurs during Pluto's transit of Aquarius, suggesting transformation through technological and democratic innovation. 2034, we have Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Cancer, so Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Cancer, and Saturn in Leo trine Pluto in Aquarius. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, historically associated with explosive innovation and liberation movements, occurs in Cancer, the sign of home and nurturing. This manifests as a revolution in domestic technology, family structure, and the relationship between humans and their living spaces. So Jupiter expands whatever it touches. Uranus disrupts and liberates. Together in Cancer, they expand and liberate our understanding of home. Smart homes become truly intelligent, not merely automated, but responsive to emotional states. Family structures multiply beyond recognition. The concept of chosen family becomes legally and culturally dominant. And finally, let's talk about 2035, our midpoint assessment. We have Saturn in Virgo opposite Neptune in Pisces, and Pluto in Aquarius sextiling Jupiter in Gemini. Saturn-Neptune opposition represents the tension between structure and dissolution, between what can be measured and what can only be felt. This manifests as a collective assessment of the technological transformations of the preceding decade. Has AI enhanced or eroded human meaning? Has connectivity increased or decreased genuine connection? So Saturn, which is reality and limitation, opposite Neptune, which is illusion and transcendence, forces confrontation with uncomfortable questions. The decade's technological achievements are weighed against their human cost. This opposition occurring across the Virgo-Pisces axes, service health versus spirituality, dissolution, focuses particularly on healthcare, education, and the helping professions. Let's go over regional field projections, talking about North America, the US, and Canada. So the Pluto return of the United States dominates this region's astrological profile. Expect constitutional crises, fundamental renegotiation of federal-state relationships, and the emergence of new political formations that transcend traditional partisan categories. Canada, experiencing Pluto and Aquarius trine its natal Uranus, emerges as a technological innovator and mediator between conflicting global powers. Let's talk about Europe. Saturn's transit through Aries and Taurus challenges European integration with nationalist movements gaining momentum while simultaneously revealing their inadequacy for addressing transnational challenges. The Uranus and Gemini period, 2026 through 2032, accelerates digital integration across the continent, creating new forms of pan-European identity that exist parallel to traditional national affiliations. Let's talk about Asia. Now, I think this astrology AI integration framework is developed primarily by Indian and Chinese researchers, positions Asia as the global leader in computational astrological methodology. Pluto in Aquarius aligns with the continent's technological trajectory, suggesting Asia will define the terms on which AI and tradition coexist. And now let's talk about the global south. So Neptune in Aries focuses spiritual and artistic creativity on the global south, with new cultural movements emerging from Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia that challenge northern dominance of global consciousness. Jupiter's transit through fire signs accelerate economic development, though with significant regional variation. And that's happening next year through 2031. So let's talk about our predictions for the 2027 through 2035 period and how these have been validated through multiple independent methodologies. So just, the historical archetypal correlation, machine learning ensemble, multi-messenger correlation, consistency across methodology suggests that our probability field mappings accurately reflect the archetypal pressures shaping this period. Here's what's recommended for practitioners, myself included. I strongly suggest that you integrate AI into your astrological practice. It's not optional. Because it's going to be here, and practitioners must understand the strengths and limitations of machine learning models to effectively collaborate with these tools. Also, Pluto in Aquarius period will fundamentally restructure astrological institutions. Traditional certifying bodies, educational frameworks, and professional associations will face existential challenges and transformation opportunities. Now, I would like to go over Neptune-Uranus cycle and the restructuring of collective consciousness. So we know that Neptune enters Aries in 2039, Uranus enters Leo in 2041, and Pluto enters Pisces in 2044. This is the dissolution of materialist paradigms and the emergence of consciousness-based civilization. First of all, the 2036 through 2060 period represents the most profound shift in collective consciousness since the Enlightenment. Three major outer planetary ingresses, Neptune into Aries, Uranus into Leo, and Pluto into Pisces, combine to dismantle the materialist paradigm that has dominated Western thought since the 17th century and to initiate what we term the consciousness-based civilization. So our key findings, we have the integration of quantum field theory with astrological methodology reaching its full maturity, with the probability field model of planetary influence achieving empirical validation through consciousness research. The boundary between subjective and objective reality becomes permeable with collective consciousness research demonstrating measurable effects on physical systems. So by the late 2030s, the theoretical framework first proposed in the 2020s reaches full maturation. The understanding of astrology shifts from celestial influence to informational retrieval, the recognition that planetary configurations encode information about cosmic order rather than causing events through mechanical force. This framework, which we term quantum archaeological astrology, rests on four pillars. The holographic principle, all information in the universe is encoded at every point. The celestial sphere is a natural holographic screen encoding information about the entire cosmos. The block universe, past, present, and future coexist in the four-dimensional space-time manifold. All moments are eternally present, accessible through appropriate symbolic technologies. We have non-local correlation. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that connection persists across distance. Astrological correlations are instances of this non-local information structure. And we have participatory observation. The observer doesn't merely record reality, but participates in its creation. The astrologer's interpretation collapses probability fields into actualized meaning. Now, we need to observe our major ingresses and their significance. So 2039, we have Neptune entering Aries. Neptune's transit of Aries represents the first ingress of the transcendent planet into the cardinal fire sign since the mid-19th century. Historically, Neptune in Aries correlates with the emergence of new spiritual movements, the dissolution of established religious authorities, and the infusion of mystical consciousness into collective action. The previous Neptune in Aries period, 1861 through 1875, witnessed the spiritualist movement, the founding of Theosophy, and the beginnings of what would become the New Thought movement. It also coincided with the American Civil War, a reminder that spiritual awakening and collective violence often coexist. So, the 2039 ingress catalyzes what we term techno-mysticism, the fusion of digital technology with spiritual practice. AI systems trained on mystical texts generate new scriptures. Virtual reality becomes a medium for collective meditation, and the boundary between human and artificial consciousness becomes a subject of spiritual inquiry. Then in 2041, we have Uranus entering Leo. This transit is 2041 through 2048. Uranus is in Leo, and it represents the disruption and innovation of creative expression, individual identity, and the relationship between the one and the many. Uranus in Leo historically correlates with revolutions in art, the emergence of new forms of self-expression, and challenges to established authority in creative fields. The previous Uranus in Leo period, 1934 through 1942, witnessed the flowering of swing music, the golden age of Hollywood, and the emergence of mass media as a dominant cultural force. It also coincided with the rise of charismatic political leaders who exploited these new media forms. So, our field projection is the 2041 ingress catalyzes the democratization of creativity, AI tools that enable anyone to produce professional quality, whether it's art, music, and literature. This democratization raises profound questions about the nature of creativity and the value of human contribution. What does art mean when anyone can produce it? What is the role of the artist in an age of universal creative capability? 2044, we have Pluto entering Pisces. So 2044 through 2068 represents the most profound spiritual transformation in centuries. Pluto in Pisces historically correlates with the dissolution of established religious forms, the emergence of new mystical movements, and the confrontation with collective shadow material at the level of the species soul. So the previous Pluto in Pisces period, we're going to say 1797 through 1823, witnessed the Romantic movement, the emergence of transcendentalism, and the beginnings of what would become modern spiritual pluralism. It also coincided with the Napoleonic Wars, another reminder that transformation and violence are often intertwined. So the 2044 ingress initiates what we term the consciousness-based civilization, a global shift in which subjective experience becomes as valid a source of knowledge as objective measurement. The materialist paradigm that has dominated since the 17th century gives way to a more integrated understanding that honors both the seen and the unseen, the measurable and the meaningful. Decade by decade projections, we're going through 2036 through 2040, the Neptune ingress decade. Neptune in late Pisces and entering Aries. Final years of Neptune in Pisces, 2036 through 2039, bringing the dissolution of boundaries that began with the 2011 through 2026 transition to completion. The distinction between real and virtual, between human and artificial, between natural and synthetic becomes increasingly untenable. The Neptune ingress into Aries in 2039 redirects this dissolving energy into new forms of collective action and spiritual expression. So we know that there's probably going to be like new religious movements emerging that synthesize digital technology with mystical practice, AI-generated scriptures gaining followers, virtual reality pilgrimage sites attract millions. The boundaries between spiritual traditions dissolve as easily as the boundaries between nations and cultures. All right. And really quick, I'm wondering, because I don't want to go too far because I'm already almost 2 hours into this video. And I was just going to keep going from it, kind of going on. But what I want to do really is go over some more stuff. And so I will, in my next video, I'm going to go over a few different things in regards to natal chart data for case studies. So I want to show you guys, as students of astrology and even as practitioners, just people that want to learn more about astrology in general, I would like to show you guys how I go about assessing a natal chart, the data, the calculations, and how I compile it as a case study for a consultation with a client. And also, it's going to be produced as essay questions and answers, and I'll go over the questions, and I'll also be going over the answers in detail. So if you want to check me out, subscribe, like, comment. I love astrology, and I will see you in the next video with peace and love.